was Devil's Night last year, and my friend Brianna and I had been at our friend Andre's house in Maywood watching scary movies. At around 10 p.m., we left his place to walk home, and I remember shivering from the cold north wind. As we walked home, the leaves were crunching under our shoes. The street was fairly quiet, except for the sound of Brianna and I as we chatted nervously, spooked by the stories we'd heard about Devil's Night. As we walked, we talked about how we wished that we would have just stayed over at Andre's. About halfway home, a car with tinted windows crept by, moving so slowly that it made my skin crawl. I couldn't see who was inside, and it gave me a weird feeling in my stomach. I whispered to Brianna, "That car's been following us for a while." She looked over her shoulder, her eyes wide with fear. Yeah, I noticed it too. Maybe it's just a coincidence? We quickened our pace, hoping the car would pass us by, but it stayed behind, matching our speed. As the anxiety gnawed at me, I tried to convince myself that we were just being paranoid. After all, it could be someone just going the same way. But then the car's headlights flashed, and it pulled closer. My heart raced, and Brianna grabbed my arm. We had to turn onto a quieter, darker street to get home, but that meant we'd be even more isolated. The car continued to trail us, and my mind raced with fear. Brianna whispered, "What do we do? Should we run?" Running seemed like a bad idea, as we didn't know who was in the car or what they wanted. We decided to cross the street, thinking maybe they'd drive by, but the car mirrored our move and crossed too. Panic was creeping in. With a lump in my throat, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. My hand shook, and I had to fight to keep my voice steady as I described our situation and location to the operator. The car pulled up alongside us, its tinted windows concealing the occupants. My heart felt like it might burst out of my chest as the window slowly rolled down, revealing a face I didn't recognize. It was a man. He said, "You girls shouldn't be out here all alone on Devil's Night." My mind raced, and I stammered, "We're almost home. We don't want any trouble." The man's smile widened. "Oh, I'm sure we can find some fun together." I had left the phone line open so the operator could hear everything that was happening. After the man uttered that chilling phrase, Brianna and I sprinted down the street. Behind us, we heard the man curse and start to speed after us. We cut through the park a few blocks from my house and were able to put some distance between us and the man. We didn't stop running until we reached my house. We crouched inside the front door, locking it behind us and telling my mom about the creepy man. As we waited for police, my mom was going to open the door to look down the street, but I told her I was too scared and not to open the door, and I asked her to turn off the lights. As we hid behind the door in the dark, we did hear a car drive by slowly right before the police showed up. The police took our statements and assured us they would look into the incident. That night, we locked all the doors and windows and tried to calm our racing hearts. Devil's Night had truly lived up to its name, and it was an experience neither Brianna nor I would ever forget. As we huddled together on the couch, we knew how fortunate we were to escape that terrifying encounter. Devil's Night would never be the same for us. The fear we felt was all too real. A couple of years ago, on Devil's Night, my younger brother Miguel and I had an experience we'll never forget. Our cousin Christina was in town, and she was nothing but trouble. We knew she had a knack for getting into mischief, but we had no idea what she had in store for us that night. We hung out in our small suburban New Mexico neighborhood. As the sun set, Christina, who was a few years older than us, convinced us to go for a walk with her. Little did we know what we were getting into. As we strolled along a few blocks from my home, Christina reached into her bag and pulled out a carton of eggs. She grinned mischievously, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Let's have some fun," she said, hurling an egg at a house. It splattered against the wall, leaving a mess behind. Miguel and I exchanged uneasy glances. "Christina, we shouldn't be doing this. What if someone sees us?" But Christina just laughed, her laughter echoing through the quiet neighborhood as she continued her egg assault on houses. Panic began to creep in as we knew this could lead to serious trouble. The night grew colder and our breaths hung in the air like ghosts. Suddenly, the flashing lights of a police car illuminated the street behind us, and the wailing siren sent a jolt of fear through us. Christina's eyes widened. "Run, guys, run!" We sprinted through the dark, feeling the weight of guilt pressing upon us. Christina led us through a path that cut into a nearby forest. The trees seemed to close in around us, and our breaths grew heavy as we ran deeper into the woods. I kept glancing back, expecting the police to be hot on our heels. Then, as we turned a bend in the path, Miguel tripped and fell behind. Christina stopped and yelled at him to hurry, but before he could get up, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. My heart skipped a beat, thinking it was one of the police officers, but as the figure drew closer, I realized it wasn't. It was someone else. It was someone I didn't recognize from our neighborhood. They had their hood up, and in the dark, it was hard to tell exactly what they looked like. But their eyes gleamed with a strange intensity. I grabbed Miguel, pulling him up and urging him to run. We darted off the trail into some underbrush, hoping to lose the cops as well as the creepy stranger who mysteriously happened to just be wandering through the forest in the dark. As we ran, branches slapped our face and the leaves made loud noises under our feet. I realized that we were making too much noise and we needed to change things up to avoid being caught. I told Miguel to stop and we decided to hide behind a large tree, hoping to wait for a few minutes until the police and the stranger passed us by. As we tried to slow our breath, we strained to listen, trying to hear if we could hear anyone walking in the direction that we had come from. It was eerily quiet, and the only thing I could hear was Miguel and I's breathing. Miguel tapped me on the shoulder and whispered, "What about Christina? Do you think she's okay?" I just shrugged. My only concern was to get my brother home safely. It was then that we heard it, a terrible scream. A man's tormented voice echoed through the forest around us. Miguel grabbed onto me with both arms as we waited, trying to figure out what to do next. At that moment, I wondered if Miguel and I could make it back to where the police were and take our chances with them, owning up to throwing the eggs, but at least escaping from the mysterious stranger. But before I had time to make up my mind, we heard the faint sound of a branch snap. I pulled Miguel towards me, and we crouched down, hoping that whoever it was would just walk past us. I remember I closed my eyes, trying to will myself out of the situation. It was then that we heard a whisper, "Guys, what are you doing?" And Christina emerged beside us. We asked her if she had seen any sign of the creepy man, and she said she hadn't seen anyone and that she thought that the police gave up pursuit. Miguel asked how she hadn't heard the terrible scream that we'd heard, and she just shrugged and said, "Let's go home." We followed Christina back to the path and then made our way back to our home. Before we went inside, Christina stopped us and told us we couldn't tell anyone about what we had done that night. Miguel then asked her one more time if she had seen or heard the man in the bush. Christina looked down at her feet and she shifted her position uncomfortably. And in the first time since I've known her, she actually looked afraid as she said, "Yeah, I did see him." But then she looked at us both and said, "Oh, we're never going to speak of it again. Got it?" Miguel and I have talked many times trying to figure out why the man was in the bush in the dark. But our imaginations get the better of us, and we must change the topic before we get too scared thinking about what could have happened that night. This happened a couple decades ago, on Devil's Night in 2004. There was a mysterious MySpace post circulating that dared teens to walk through the cemetery that was a few blocks from my house. It was a popular topic of conversation at my school, with some kids excited to accept the challenge. Most parents said no, and other kids chickened out, but my two best friends, Kai, Layla, and I decided we'd do it. We made up some lame excuse about having a group project and lied to our parents, determined to be able to tell everyone at school that we had accepted the challenge. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we met up near the cemetery's rusty iron gate. The eerie silence of the graveyard was broken only by the distant sounds of crickets. We exchanged nervous glances and tried to act brave. Once inside, the darkness swallowed us, and the old tombstones cast long, looming shadows. Layla clutched my arm, and Kai tried to make a joke to lighten the mood. But deep down, we were all spooked. That's when a flashlight beam suddenly pierced through the darkness, making us jump. A woman, in a tattered coat and clutching a flickering flashlight, appeared out of nowhere. She had a wild look in her eyes, and her hair was messy. She asked if we could help her find her cat. We felt obligated to help the woman. We thought it was just a weird coincidence that she was here. As we walked with her deeper into the cemetery, the woman started asking strange questions. "How old are you guys?" she asked. 16, Layla answered cautiously. The woman's grin widened, revealing crooked yellow teeth. "Ah, perfect," she muttered under her breath. My heart raced, and I exchanged a worried look with my friends. Something about this situation felt terribly wrong. We slowed our pace, hoping to make an escape. That's when we heard a rustling in the bushes. Shadows moved, and strange, distorted whispers filled the air. It was as if the cemetery itself had come alive. The woman's flashlight flickered, and we realized the danger we were in. "Let's get out of here," Kai shouted, tugging on Layla's arm. I reached to grab Layla's other arm just as the woman clutched on to my wrist, and her flashlight swung to reveal a group of other figures emerging from the darkness. They all wore twisted smiles and seemed to be closing in on us. Our hearts pounded as panic set in. We realized this was no ordinary dare. It was a trap. The woman must have been the one who posted that chilling MySpace challenge. She had lured us into the cemetery with sinister intention. "Run!" I yelled, yanking my arm away from the woman's grasp. We sprinted through the maze of tombstones, our breathless screams echoing through the night. It felt like an eternity, but eventually we made it to the gate. We didn't stop running until we reached the safety of our neighborhood. We never looked back to see if the woman and her sinister companions were following us. We learned a valuable lesson that Devil's Night. Some dares are meant to be avoided. It was a night we'll never forget. We were too freaked out about the whole thing and didn't want to get in trouble for lying to our parents, so we didn't tell them. I guess we'll never know what could have happened that night.